All right, so let me see if I can get around here, kind of give a over-the-top perspective on this. So this is where we're at the moment. I'm gilding this. So the yellow is going to be gold, green's going to be green, red's going to be red, all done with foil sheet. And so what had to be done first is use an acrylic paint to basically just seal the stone. And then I'll end up putting on some sizing and then do the leafing, which I'll show on video. But I figured nobody wanted to see, me painting. But this is, this is the next step for the sign process, I guess you'd call it. It kind of gives you an idea of, the nice thing about doing this work is you kind of go over this piece, 100 times for every one time that you're actually doing something. So which makes it kind of interesting. The gilding's the final step. And at this point, I have been over every piece of this, every number, every line, multiple times. From tracing it initially with the pattern and the Seural transfer paper. Then it's a matter of, okay, I go back through and I paint it so that I don't lose my pattern. So that's the second time. Then we go through and we cut all of our letters. So there's a third time. And then you go back through, you repaint it again with a background color of whatever color you're gilding. So there's a fourth time. And then finally, the fifth time that you go over this thing is when you're gilding. And that's kind of, it's this repetitive thing. And each time it's like a little crisper, a little better. And so I think it's kind of therapeutic, It's going to be interesting to see what the final kind of outcome is on this. Like I said, I've never done a relief carving where it's basically just V-cut letters. That style of chiseling. So it's kind of interesting. It's not even a two-dimensional or, I guess it is. It's two-dimensional rather than a three-dimensional sculpture. It's, I guess you'd even call it like 2.5 dimensional because it has depth, but it's not meant to appear deep. I don't know. It's unique. So I'm psyched. I think this is going to be a lot of fun to kind of keep going with and see what the end result's going to be. And the best thing is for my own place. So it doesn't, other people don't have to like it. It's my art. And I think that's one thing that, people need to realize is, just because someone else doesn't like your art doesn't mean, that it's not valuable. It's not valid. Art is for the artist, not for the, yes, it's great to be appreciated by others, but, and that's why a lot of artists start, I'm going to be a famous artist someday, but how many of those people actually become famous? Other people do art for art's sake, and that's kind of where I'm at right now. I don't care what other people think of it. I like this, and it's unique for me. I know there's probably a million other carvings out there that people have done in this style, and that's cool. It's a first for me, and I'm having fun doing it, so why not? Anyways, yeah, I'll get on with the gilding process next. All right, guys, so we talked the other day about gilding a little bit. I started showing you the process. So kind of what I've gone through so far is now that I've got my letters cut and everything kind of is finalized shape, I went through and I painted with just a cheap acrylic paint all of my letters. And the idea is that it acts as a sealer, but I also use the same color. Well, I say same color, but a similar color as a background, and it just kind of hides flaws in the leafing. You know, which is kind of nice. Leafing is not super difficult. It is to make it look really good, but for what I'm doing, it's not. I don't need it to be perfect. I'm using imitation gold leaf. Give you an idea, it's like 40 cents a sheet. I'm just going to throw out bullshit numbers here. 40 cents a sheet for imitation gold leaf, or $4 a sheet for actual gold leaf. The major issue is the imitation does tarnish, so you have to put a top coat on it, a clear coat. With real gold leaf, you don't necessarily have to. The gold leaf that I'm using is it's a rose gold imitation gold leaf, and then I'm also going to be doing a red foil leaf and a green foil leaf. So at this point, what I'm doing is everything's already been painted. I'm using sizing. It's a metal leaf glue, and I'll go through and I'll paint the glue exactly the same way I did the lettering. And this stuff takes about 15 minutes to dry. And then you start laying down your leaf on top of that. Once it goes clear, and it dries clear, then you can start laying down your leaf. So I'm going to go through, I'll paint this, and we'll come back when we get to the leafing process. All right, so one thing I didn't talk about is with the adhesive, you have to make sure that you know, there's no puddling. Once it goes clear, it's going to be tacky, but the puddles will end up staying longer and everything else, and you can end up running into some issues with work. One of the issues I'm having today is, you know, I'm working outside, and so the wind is a little bit of a pain in the butt, but you know, we can make it work. So now the gilding process. This stuff is really forgiving comparative to real gold leaf, so it's not as big a deal. All I'm going to do is just kind of get it in. I can even take off some of this, put it in the spots that I've missed, and it's, like I said, it's super forgiving. And we just kind of work it in there with a blush brush, and it'll do its thing. If you do get spots that end up without any leaf on it, you can go back through after your glue is dried, and you can just redo that section. There are guys I've seen that can float this stuff on their brush. It's a talent that I have not acquired yet. So we're just going to go through and just kind of keep working this stuff in, try and get it into all the surfaces. Like I said, this stuff is pretty cheap, so I'm not overly concerned with waste. To me, it's about coverage. I'd just as soon make sure I have plenty of coverage, and if I waste a little bit of this stuff, fine. The one thing that you do have to make sure you do is tell your wife that you're gilding, or your girlfriend that you're gilding, because when you get done, it will look like you've been to the club, and there's stripper glitter everywhere. So unless you've got a wife that goes with you, or, you know, a very understanding partner, just, you know, keep that in mind, because you will look like, you know, you've been to the champagne room. You know, this stuff kind of gets everywhere. So I put it on with a blush brush first. Then I'm going to go through with a little stiffer brush. And this is still a pretty soft painter's brush. And I'm just going to take and go with the direction of the letters, and just kind of make sure that this gets down into where the V's are in all the letters. And if you'll notice, it's removing anything that's not in direct contact with glue, and it's also leaving some of these brush lines in there. So you've got to be kind of conscientious of that as well, because you are kind of buffing it at this point. Just go through and knock off all your excess. Make sure you're getting this thing down in to all of your cracks and crevices that are that have your glue on it, and you know, kind of give this stuff a fighting chance. I do have a few spots here that you know, didn't get enough sizing onto it, so you know, I am going to have to go back through and touch this up with just a little bit of leaf. Of course, this is also where the background color comes in really handy, because you don't necessarily see it super well. You know, this is a driveway sign. You know, it's not something that's going into the house. So am I concerned about it being perfect? Well, not really. I can kind of get away with some of these imperfections. It's going to be seen by cars as they're driving by. So, you know, I don't necessarily have to worry about it being, you know, able to be looked at under a microscope to make sure that everything is covered just so. Although, you know, it's nice to have it right. So I'll probably go back through and I'll touch this up. And literally, you just go over the top of it with, you know, what you've got there for existing leaf. And you just go over the top of it with a little bit more glue, very light coat. And let that tack up in the same way. And then just put down some, you can even use scrap that you've got. There's quite a bit on this blush brush. I can go through and just kind of dab that in there, and it'll help, you know, fill in those voids. But all in all, I think it looks pretty good. I'll get the camera here, and we'll come over the top, and you can see, you know, and that's a fairly noticeable difference from just yellow paint to the, you know, gilding. You know, it really makes a piece pop in stone, especially just because it's not natural. It's a very different sheen from the rest of the stone. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to getting in the other two foils for the red and the green. And seeing how that kind of comes together. Those are being shipped in from China, so God knows, it's first time I've bought from this website, so it's going to be really interesting to see if it takes, you know, 6 months, kind of like you know, ordering from Wish or something like that. Anyway, so that's it. I'm going to go through and I'll gild the rest of this, the second word here, the cottage, and then once we've got everything gilded, I'll come back with a finished product for you, and I'll show you it in place.